Okay, so we are, where are we on this case study? We're in week 2. Let's talk about the teams for a second. We divided everybody in the class up into teams. You've all been assigned an advisor. We're still playing around with what the teams should actually do and how they should interact, but we really thought that we ought to set the course up so you get some personal interaction on, especially on the case study stuff, because it's really what happens. You end up having to work out all these numbers and issues with others in your community or in a deliberation. But we haven't really figured out technically how to do that yet. What I did want to do, though, was show you what we have lined up in the way of a template for the presentations that you have to give for your final project. So this is just to make it, we don't want everybody stressing out over their what kind of presentation they're going to, what it's going to look like and how they're going to present it. So we want to make this as easy as possible. So we've set up a set of template slides that you can expand or limit yourself to just the bare minimum, up to you. But this is the title slide. This would be your group preparing a final report. Let's see. So that's the outline slide, and this is all we're asking you to do is, minimum of 5 slides, kind of explaining how this process works and what reevaluation findings you came up with, and kind of what your recommendations are at the end. So we've just set these slides up. So if you want, if your team wants to use this framework, you can. If you want to do something else, you're welcome to. We're the advisors and I are here to help you with any of this stuff. Second slide is what we're going to be working on this week, which is, how many jobs do you need to create to get back to full employment within the planning period. Next week, we're going to start drilling down into what program theaters can get you to that number. And then we'll probably take 2 weeks to sort through the jobs potential. Week 3, we're going to focus on what the theaters are and how they're different. And then week 4, we'll try to finish up estimating what the potential in Doña Ana County is for each theater, and then calculate the total job potential and contrast it against what your needs are. And then we'll go into factor of production gaps. And this kind of matches what the lectures are going to be. They're going to be pacing along the same way. So the 4th slide is, pick a factor of production gap issue that's going to shut down one of your theaters if you don't fix it. And then the program apparatus planning recommendations, which is, your recommendations to the mayor and county commissioners who've asked you to be part of this deliberation. What should they be focusing their planning efforts on, and what should the process and parameters for the RFP for whoever's going to do the planning or the facilitating look like? And that's basically it. You will also have the Shark Tank questions to contend with, but those are pretty much taken care of when you, and this is the, especially if you're having to get approval for your plan, or you're trying to get money for programs later on, or whether you're sitting in judgment of whether someone gets funded or not, or gets priority or not. These are some of the questions that should be the template for kind of the post-planning part of the process, where you have to actually go to the community and explain what you're doing and why you're doing it. So then I put some resource slides in here, and these are all just off of the pitch decks and the presentations that were done prior to, or that were already done, that you can see in the resource page. Okay, so, and I'm gonna walk through what in a slide deck essentially the questions that would be asked in one of these flash assessments, starting with what we went over in the coherence session. I'm going to go through it really fast, and we get to the needs assessment, the job creation, where we start estimating how many jobs you're going to need to create. I'm going to stop, switch over to the workbook, show you where it is, and then you can follow along in the workbook. Does everybody have the workbook for week 2? It should be on the website. Went up late this afternoon, but it should be up there. And it's essentially a continuation of the workbook that we went through last case study session. And when we finish, week 5, you will have a full handbook that has all the sections in it. We're just giving you one at a time. So, let's see. So if you remember, going through when we were talking about who's actually been invited to be part of this, what are our expectations, and are you a thinker, planner, or doer? We kind of went through all that stuff. And I'm just going to fly through this just to refresh what we did last week. So in coherence, what are the objectives, framework, process, rules, common mission and purpose, everybody's on the same page, what the planning period is, the need for diversity, how big is the team going to be. And then we start these questions are coded into the calculus. So is this the first time the community's used a process like this? No, you're revisiting an existing one. And if it was no, we go on to if it's no, we're going on to the last. We're evaluating the last assessment. Who is we? It's a Las Cruces MSA. I've had this question take 4 hours to get agreement on before, and we're doing an assessment. So what's the formal scope and responsibility for this convenience? An assessment. So it could end up becoming a strategy document, and eventually it could become a plan that you use as an underwriting document. But when this scope changes, the definition of what you produce changes. And you don't want to people get confused. A lot of times if you move on from here, some people think they're writing a planning document. Some people, they think they're just doing an assessment. Some people think you're just having a conversation. We found that you have to be explicit about this stuff. Scope of work, this one's comprehensive, covering the entire economic development apparatus, including service sector, economic base, program theaters, and all the factor production gap issues. What are we trying to do? Trying to get to full employment after this pandemic finishes its damage. What's the level of our ambition? It's pragmatic. What's attainable with a concerted effort and a reasonable amount of support? It's not an aspirational goal or stretch goal, that could be changed, but you don't want people obviously using the same, or using different levels of ambition or aspiration. What size group? So what we're doing is, this group that met before, whose work we're evaluating, there were only like 12 of them. Now we're trying to we're part of a larger community-wide customized group that's been handpicked to meet the Wisdom of Crowds standard. And so normally this would mean, a lot more than just a few meetings. We'd be deliberating for probably 6 weeks at least, spread over time, not too long an interval between times so people don't lose track. But we're going for Wisdom of Crowds validity on this one. And then we asked everybody to kind of check the boxes here for kind of why are they doing this? What's your particular interest? Once you see those, you can kind of see how the group's made up and what the values of the group are. Then we ask everybody to complete this sentence. So none of this stuff did we do in the first session. We're not going to try to take you through the step by step. I just want you to see how this is set up and get a feel for it. And this can change, but this is personal. Every person would write their own mission statement. And then what factors are likely to make us miscalculate on this? You know, what things should we be watching, or assumptions should we test? And what things, if we don't catch, could make us fail? And I guess you just check the boxes here, and it's probably all of them. I mean, the reality is there's so many things changing and there's so many things different now that we're from the past planning cycle, that you really need to check on all this stuff. And we'll get into a couple of these, like the falling economic base multiplier. We're going to talk about that a little later today. So remember that one. What's your rationale for using a more comprehensive and rigorous process? So why do you need to go through all this brain damage instead of just having a retreat and picking a couple of economic sectors, which is the kind of the traditional approach to it, and then make a list of all the things that you need to fix to be competitive. So this is a long list. Again, you go through these and you check the ones that you actually are going to use for a rationale. And we would stop on each one of these and really talk about them. And this is really the reason to go through all this trouble. And if these issues don't matter, then go do it the old way. There are a lot of risks, and there's reasons not to do this more comprehensive and rigorous planning management process. So it could raise expectations, and then if the money doesn't come, you're stuck with higher goals or goals that you can't meet, and nobody that's in a position of responsibility on any of this stuff wants to do that. So anyway, there's a long list of reasons why a process like this, or something this exhaustive and detailed, is resisted. And it's important to know what those are. And it's not saying every community ought to go to the full depth that we're showing you, but you just need to know that it's here and it's there if you want to use it. The economic development definition we're using is the pure definition, which is it's growing the economy of your place faster than the population, which basically gives everybody the extra resources needed to improve. You could have a social equity rationale for your economic development effort. It could be directed at a particular place in the community or population. It could be amenity driven if you're not worried about the economic development of your community, just worried about the back end quality. So there's lots of different ways to come at this economic development business, as Noreen kind of pointed out in her opening lecture. So what parts of the community's economic development apparatus are we trying to plan and manage? So for this case, it's all relevant theaters are being evaluated, but we're really just focusing on the economic base. So I basically put in red the three that really apply in this run through. Is this particular assessment integrated as part of a larger planning effort, or going to be the top of a hierarchy of a larger one? And that means, is the state going to try to get all 33 counties in the state to go through this and roll it up into a regional program, regional assessment, and then a state assessment? Or are you just doing this for your community, your city, your district, your county? And it makes a difference, because you're going to want to make sure that your nomenclature and how you're setting up the calculus can be rolled up into larger areas or disaggregated into smaller ones. It's more of a process question than anything else. What's your primary metric? Jobs, money, community health, happiness, quality of life, some other metric. You got to pick one. We've chosen jobs. It's for multiple reasons. It's easier and better and a more powerful metric than money is. Jobs is. So we've chosen jobs, and this whole calculus and model set up to look at jobs. All jobs, but we're going to focus on economic-based jobs for the purposes of the case study. But the assessment that was done in May actually lays out what they believe the job losses in the service sector are going to be too. We're defining economic-based jobs as jobs where the products and services produced are sold, or the monies derived to pay for those salaries from outside the state. that brings new money in. We could say outside of Doña Ana County, and then anything you could lure from Albuquerque in the way of earnings would be economic based too. Casinos, the native tribal gaming operations are economic based for the tribe, but they're not necessarily economic based for the state until people are flying in to go gamble there. So this is an important one to pick because you want the definition for economic base in all your calculations to survive moving up to a state program. So that's where the integration question comes in. What terms of art will be used? So these are the key terms. We brought them up before: economic base job, job creation apparatus, program theaters, a procuring program versus a marketing campaign, factors of production gaps, and a strategic plan is very different than an operational plan. So those are just some of them. Who's the convener? This is a really important question before you think about doing an assessment like this at any of the levels. What you really need is a convener, somebody to compel everybody to come to the table and play nice and be deliberate and intentional about what they're doing. In this case, Ken Miyagishima, who's the mayor of Las Cruces, and the Doña Ana County Commission have invited you all personally to come and participate in this, and that's the role that you're playing. What's our planning period? So normally we take a 10-year planning period. In this case, the group decided to go 5 years because they thought they could get through this pandemic and recover in 5 years. They didn't want to make it 10. They may want to revisit that later, but if this pandemic doesn't get over any quicker than it looks like it. So 5 years to a COVID reset. In other words, where are you back to some sort of normal from which you've kind of recovered all the automatic job losses that you might after the lockdown? Where are we in the process? Okay, so TAPUMA is a think, assess, plan, underwrite, manage, and account process. So it's not just planning, it's the whole continuum of action. From thinking about it to measuring what the production of your operations are after the fact, and then taking that knowledge and plowing it back into your thinking. It's an actual continuum that you need to maintain. This business of doing a 5-year plan every 5 years is not going to make it in a world that's changing this fast. So this is where we are in the process. It's really important to keep in mind we're not thinking about this anymore. I mean, we can. Anytime you want to go back and redress something because you found out something's changed, you can petition the group to go back and reconsider a finding. But it's important to know that we're not at the planning and we're not underwriting it. We're not making any commitments on who's going to do what yet. We're just trying to figure out what's needed and what's possible. What rules? We're looking for 100% unanimous consensus on every finding. If we get that, then whatever the calculus is, produces as a way of conclusions, are essentially already pre-accepted by the group, and you've got consensus on the findings. That way, you leave this process with a group of people. A lot of people they're not going to agree on very many other things, but they've agreed on the parameters for this economic development recovery. The standard for determination, we said acclamation here, so we're doing this in a town hall setting where your groups are not meeting offline on a Zoom call like this. You're in a town hall at tables, and you can hear each other, talk to each other, people can move around, and we're asking for acclamation for yes or no. Oh, you're getting lots of questions. Do you want to show do you want to stop right now?
I think afterwards we can.
Okay. So Sarah's going to stop. I'm going to stop in a minute. I'm actually pretty close to getting through the coherence, and then we'll stop. We're getting lots of resource page questions that she wants to show you. So the other is, what's the process for validating and revising? In this case, they brought Charles Lehman in. He went through all the findings and the conclusions and wrote a report, which is in the final reports on the resource page. What's to be done with the assessment? So this is another one where people a lot of times in a group have different ideas about what this finding or ultimate conclusion that the assessment produces, what's it for? You're going to publish it and try to get the community to buy into it. You're going to publish it online and continue to work it. What are you going to use it for playing with scenarios? What are you going to do? In this case, we said you're going to use this assessment to outline the parameters of a broader planning effort that needs to take place. The community is going to have to go to another level of planning, and you need to get the parameters set for that, and that's why we're doing this assessment. Nobody's making any commitments based on the assessment. It's too early, it's too rough, it's too cursory to be using to write policy. This is a kind of a teaching and framing and scenario running tool. Okay, now we're getting into the needs assessment. These are the questions that we're going to answer for this for this week in the case study. It's trying to come up with the number. It's the number of economic-based jobs your programs and your program apparatus are going to have to produce if you want to get to full employment in 5 years. That's the target question, and we're going to have to ask and answer a fairly long list of questions to get that number. And that's what this session's for. So, Sarah, do you want to talk about the resource page? So we had some questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I can go ahead and do that now. So I just know, thank you guys, everyone, for using the chat function today. Are you through with this presentation, or are you going to come back to this?
No, I'm going to continue.
Okay. So really quick, I just wanted to share my screen and show you guys the resources page where all of this is located. And give me a minute.
You want me to get out? Oh, good.
No, you're good. I kicked you out. Okay, so here, this is the resource page. And if any of you guys have any hard times finding it, I do believe Eric put the link directly in the chat. So this is where all of the documents and recordings and all the materials that you're going to need are going to be located. Yeah, so everyone should have the link. If not, let us know.
You go up to the top and you can see in the corner.
Yeah, this is the actual address. You guys should all have it. And Eric also posted it in the chat. Oh, oops. Sorry. Okay. So each week I have been posting the meeting links here just in case you lose it or can't find it. So Friday's webinar link will be up here as soon as it's ready to go. Here are the documents and links for just the basic materials like the agenda and the manual. Here's a Zoom help page if you guys want to freshen up on your Zoom resources. The glossaries here as well. Here's where all of the case study documents are. So everything from today. Here's the backgrounder. Last week's week 1 workbook pages 1 through 5. And then this week we posted the week 2 section. So it'll take you through 6 through 10. They should pull that one up. Yeah, so pulling this one up to follow along today is a good idea. The EMSI reports, these are Charles's reports. He was presenting this report from 2020 on Friday, which was not up. So we had the old one up, and they're both up now. The Las Cruces Flash Assessment, this is that PowerPoint presentation. The final report for the Las Cruces Flash Assessment is here. And then the PowerPoint template that Mark was just going through, we will load at the end of today's session. So it'll be here. And then here's where all of the recordings and slide decks are located. So you can see, if you click on Sunday's opening session last week, here's the welcome and introductions. We broke them down just so they'd be a little easier to watch. But these are all links. The recordings will take you to a YouTube page where you can view the full section. And then the slides will take you to an online slide sharing program. So you can see the actual slides that were presented. And again, last week's case study is here. And then Fridays, recordings and slides, and Charles's report again. So this is the same report that's up here. But that's just how to navigate this page. And each week, as we go through these case studies and lectures, all of these will be posted. Here's the student list. So this is how you can tell where your group is and the contact information. And so I made the list sortable. So if you go and you click on the arrows, you can sort by any of these categories. So if you want to see, find your name, you can go by first or last name. If you want to find out who's in your group, just click that arrow there and give it a little second to think. And let's see, come on. There we go. So now you can see it has sorted into the groups. It goes in order except for 10, of course. And then your advisors are going to be to the right over here. There's also, at the end here, you can also print the list as a PDF, or you can download it into Excel or Pages as a CSV. If you want to reach your advisors, all of their contact information is down here. And if you click the mail icon, you'll send them a direct email, or you can use their cell phones are here too. So I think that covers all the questions we got. If you guys have any others, just shoot them my way. Thank you.
Any more questions?
I think that's it. Yep, Joy, I think is the last question, and all the contact information is at the very bottom of the resources page, so just keep scrolling down and you'll see it. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to mention. If you don't see something, be sure to hit refresh, because sometimes you will have an old cache and it just won't pull up the most recent version of the page.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So far, so good.
Okay. All right. So this is where we left off.
Good. Do
key questions. Oops, I got to do my.
Play from current slide. Sorry.
So a short refresh here.
Quick review.
Okay, so these are the questions that we're going to try to answer during the during the needs assessment. So we're really looking for how many actual economic-based jobs do we need to create in the next 5 years to get to full employment. And this is a really important number to carry around as a community and put out there, because it sets the goal. And nothing's worse than not knowing what the number is and having half the community think it's one number and the other half think it's a number, or everybody having their own number, because then everybody else is wrong. So we just found it enormously clarifying to get one single number that everybody can agree to, even though there are everybody knows there are other scenarios that might happen. How do you get the number? There's three factors. How many jobs are you going to need, economic-based jobs again, to support any new population you're going to have? And of course, if your population is going to shrink, you may have fewer households to support, so you may need fewer economic-based jobs. It's possible. But you want to start with the population. So the questions, you'll notice the questions start with how many people are living here now, how many are you going to have living here in 10 years, and then we start from there. And if you can't agree, if a group can't agree on how many people are living in the community right now and how many you want to have at the end of the planning period, you're not going to agree on any of the rest of this stuff, and you might as well quit. So this is where you start. That's why we start here. It kind of frames the geometry or the perimeter of the economy for you from the job standpoint, because it's population based. And more people you have, more jobs you're going to need, more workers you have that you're going to have to employ, that sort of thing. So population growth's the first thing you want to set and get agreement on, and then you want to get agreement on how many people do you have in the community right now that are unemployed, would work if they could, are qualified to work, and just can't find the right job or can't find a job. And that number needs to be closed to be at full employment. Now, there's always people running around looking for a job, taking some training, taking some time off, that are in your workforce, but they're just not currently working, and you never go to zero. So everybody, they call it structural unemployment. What's that number? And we're going to ask that question in a second. But you got to close your current unemployment gap to get to full employment. And then the last question or factor is, how many jobs are you going to lose over the planning period? And nobody ever asks this question. It's the elephant in the room in a recession like this, where it's driven by a collapse of your service sector. So how many jobs have we lost, or how many are we going to lose over the planning period? And you've got to make up your attrition first if you're going to have any shot at closing your current unemployment gap and creating some jobs for any population growth you might want. So those are the three factors. So the first question, population change. So this group in May said, yeah, we're probably not going to get many more people. Let's keep it the same. For 5 years, our population is going to be unchanged. So there's no basis for more economic base jobs being needed because the population is going to grow in this place. It's also not taking any off because its calculation is zero. You may want to change that. You may want to say, hey, we're probably, what if we have, in 5 years, we have another 5,000 people. You want to increase that number by 5. How many residents are working age? The group also decided, they punted on that one, said it's the same, it's going to be the same in 5 years. And mainly out of expediency. But ultimately, when you start refining this calculus, you're going to want to drill into these numbers and look at what's happening demographically. Are you becoming older really fast? If so, your workforce is going to shrink in proportion to your economy and your population. But in this case, it's zero. What percentage of all the people that are working age are actually in the workforce, are willing, able, and qualified to work? 45%. So less than half of your workforce age population is in the workforce, needs a job. That's what this means. They also estimated that wouldn't change in 5 years. That's also debatable, but they said unchanged. Unemployment. Of all the employable workers, what percentage are currently unemployed today? 4.5% was the number. That's about 3,500 people, and it's very close. They thought that was very close to structural unemployment, meaning you probably weren't going to get much below that, just because people are changing jobs so much, and the economy is going through so much turmoil. And this was, by the way, these are all before COVID hit. So these are January 2020 assumptions. All employable workers at the end of the planning period, same unemployment number. So you don't have an employment gap to close because they're saying you're at full employment. What percentage? This is a really important factor, and one that there's not a lot of data for and is not very well understood even by economists. And so you're guessing at this, but we'll show later that changing this number a little bit doesn't really change the overall calculus or the scale of the number of jobs you have very much. But it's really interesting, more interesting, a factor to consider and have the group consider, because economic base versus service sector jobs is a really important strategic differentiation that you want to make. So in this case, they estimated that 34% of all the jobs in the economy today were economic base. So what that means is for every economic base job, there are probably 2 service sector jobs supported by it. So economic base rates, so third of all your jobs got to be economic base or are currently. And again, your economic base is the key to the whole economy, because if it goes down, your service sector is going to shrink. In this case, service sector is shrinking anyway because of the lockdown. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Did you see the question from Steve.
No, I'm not watching the question.
So Steve asked, should the census figures be taken into consideration at this step?
Yeah, when the census comes in, we're going to have really good numbers. Because right now, the census is 10 years old. We're using the American Survey and some other data. It's pretty good, but a census is hard data on how many people actually live in the community. So a lot of these things would change as soon as the census numbers start coming in. Good question. And you know, there's always opinions about whether, you know, how accurate it is, and there's going to be a lot of questions given the pandemic. A lot of people may not be, you know, where they live. They're supposed to be, but and there may be reporting problems. There always is in different places. But answer is, you bet. When the census gets done, we'll have a lot better data, I think. So this is an example of what we are trying to fill out here. How many total economic base jobs are needed? You're going to want your natural attrition. So pre-COVID, how many jobs were going to be lost to the natural churn of the economy? And you know, their creative destruction, and boomers were going to retire and go out of business, and they may not, their businesses might just get closed up or sold to somebody else. Some get just put out of business by a competitor in another state or another country. But what's going to happen to our existing economic base is you're going to lose jobs, and it's almost always underestimated now because the destruction of jobs and economic base establishments is accelerating. The life cycle of these economic base employers is a fraction of what it was 30 years ago. A manufacturing plant got set up, was good for 70 to 120 years. Now it could be gone in 4 years. You could recruit a plant. We got Shot Solar to move to Mesa del Sol, built a 400,000 square foot plant, hired a couple hundred people, gone in less than 4 years. Not our fault, not their fault. It was a German company, built photovoltaic panels. It was Chinese, just took the market. So the life cycle of these economic base employers is shortening, means you have to create more jobs every year, and yet need to create more transactions per year just to offset your attrition. It's a fact of life. It's making the return on investment of economic development programs go down.
There's a question from Natalie on the slide prior to this, I believe. If one eBase job supports 2 service jobs and eBase attrition is 14%, then why is the service attrition listed as 0?
Actually, that's a great question. In this case, we weren't measuring service sector attrition, because the assumption is that as long as demand hasn't been interrupted like it has for COVID, if a restaurant goes out of business, another restaurant, if the same number of people are out there with the same amount of money looking to buy, you know, dinner every week, then that restaurant that goes out of business will be replaced by another one, which is why economic development in the past hasn't spent much attention or devoted much attention to the service sector. The assumption was if the economic base grew, the service sector would automatically grow. If the economic base was contracting, the service sector would automatically contract. And that there was very little you could do to artificially grow the service sector outside of the economic base. And so that's the reason why the group decided not to go into that. It's not that the answer is 0, but it's a really good question. I could tell you guys are thinking about this, thinking this through. Okay, thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, you can see there's just another question just came in from Peyton.
But I can't see it yet.
Are we supposed to use these
Peyton?
numbers you just went through as we evaluate the assessment, or are we to discuss these numbers with our group and determine if we think they should be adjusted? So
great question. So what we're going to do is when I get done with this, we're going to go back and say, do you want to change their assumption? So be thinking about, I don't think that's true anymore. And so we're going to go back to the workbook when I get done with this. I'm almost done. Another good question. Okay, I think that's it actually. So the next part of the this is starting off next week's case study where we start diving into where could you create jobs now. So let me get out of that.
While you're getting out, Sarah Stover just asked, is 34% e-based job a standard, or does this change for each community?
It changes. The economic base standard or ratio will change dramatically from community to community based on mostly size. So a place like New York City is so big and it produces so much, has such a huge service sector capacity that almost anything that's any economic base production that walks out in the way of a paycheck. So if an employee is working at a manufacturer, say Intel's producing computer chips there, when an employee walks out and goes to spend their money, almost all of it could get spent within the New York area. If you live in Grants, New Mexico, and you get a paycheck, there's one car dealership. If they weren't there, you'd have to go to Albuquerque to get a car. You'd have to go to Costco to get certain food in the volume you need. If you need your car fixed, you might not be able to find somebody there. If the economy's if the population and the economy isn't big enough, you have money leaking out, and that's what determines the service sector is how many places does your economy leak economic base revenue out to neighboring places. And that number, so the ratio of service sector to economic base has been actually, used to be a very few number of economic base jobs supported a lot of service sector jobs, and it's going like this because big box retailing, so it used to be you had all these stores on Main Street and mom and pop shops everywhere, and every time a big retail chain came in, a Kmart, a Walmart, a Costco, a bunch of those mom and pop stores go away. Same thing with big box retail, so that's a big box retail. Same thing with internet sales. So more internet sales, you buy your stuff on the internet instead of going down the street to a shop. That guy goes out of business, and all of a sudden it takes more economic base jobs to support the service sector. And it's just another fact of life, and it makes the overall impact is that you have to create more economic base jobs. Not only is the attrition on economic base jobs going up, but it doesn't bring you as many service sector jobs as it used to. And so it's important to keep an eye on all these numbers, and you can once the model's set up and you got some numbers in it, you can change the numbers and see how much, what if it's not 34%, what if it's 28% or 22%, or what if it's really 43%? And you can see how it changes your overall numbers or any other numbers that are based on it. So it's pretty interesting once you get all this stuff loaded. So here's the workbook, back to the workbook. So remember this from last week, and this is just all the same questions I just went over in the slides, only this was a handbook, and there's places here where you can write in the answers. There's some case study notes. This is all up on your resource guide or your resource page.
That was week one.
That's week one. So here's week two. This is where we are now. You'll recognize I went through these questions here. Population change. So here's where you would, if you've got this printed out, you're going to want to consider, this is the population number. So in December of 2024, how many people are you going to have living there? If you think it's going to be more, put in more, and that's going to mean you got to create some more economic base jobs. Workforce age 79%. I thought we had 43. 45%. There's 45 right here. Employable workforce. Oh, employable workforce. This was what percentage of your population is. Okay. So here's some narrative to some of those questions we just went through on the slide deck. So 45% of your workforce, of your 75% or your 79%, 45% are willing, able, and qualified. Unemployment, there's your unemployment rate. You think it's going to be different. So where these red arrows are is where you get a chance to change the number. So based on since May, what do we know now that we didn't know back then, or what do we know that it can't be true now, knowing what we know now, like this pandemic is going to be over in the end of June. It won't have leveled off at the end of June. It could last a lot longer. We know school's not going to probably open for a long time in some places. Economic base number, again, this is where you would want to rethink the group's original number. And this whole program is meant to be a moving and nimble process where, as conditions change and as perception change and as new data comes in, you just constantly update it. Even after you've written your plan and you got all your programs funded and cranking along, you want a group of hopefully a diverse wisdom of crowds size group, constantly refining these numbers so that you spot things that are changing, or are at least cognizant that things are changing and that there might be some risk to previous assumptions or actions you're taking. So previous finding, 14 years, so that we just went through that one. So 33% of the jobs exposed to COVID. Okay, this is where we started looking at what happened to the COVID, the lockdown for COVID. What did it do to the service sector? And it trashed the service sector. We know it did. We're going to have a lot better numbers on that. We're not dealing with it per se during the case study, because we thought it was just going to be way too complicated. But ultimately, we're going to be able to pick up data, and I'm going to show a graphic that we're working with Davin Lopez on, and that was part of the analysis that led to these assumptions. Let me see if I can pull that up. Okay. Do I have to?
No, you're good.
Good. Okay.
Well, I would zoom in. So go to view, or just do that.
So, hey, is Davin on by any chance?
Mark, I'm here.
Yeah.
Davin, do you want to walk us through this?
Yeah, I'll walk basically through it. So, well, thanks for allowing me to be here again today. Let me say just hello to everybody. But we created this document because, as I mentioned last week, we're looking to move forward into taking the original flash assessment as a baseline and turning it into a moving index. So really what we're establishing here is what was the baseline of the study. So like, for example, if you look at accommodation and food services, the major questions or the major information we came out of with the flash assessment was, of those potentially 80,000 jobs in the flash assessment, there was an estimate that 75% of those jobs would be lost due to COVID. The second part of the question was, well, how many jobs will come back organically once we get through this? And the prediction was 80%. So we created this one pager, so when we start creating the index, we can reach out to local industry expertise by each of these 21 industry categories. And we're going to be asking them basically two questions. Has your perception of what's going to happen change? And if it does, what does it change to? So it provides us with some information on, let's say, accommodation and food service. Last month they said, or May they said 75%. Maybe this quarter they're saying, well, we're looking at the environment being a little bit better right now. We're judging that 60% will be lost, but the organic recovery is going to be a lot slower. Maybe it's 60 or 70% there. This allows us to adjust the information and actually turn it into an index going forward.
So this took a long time to get through, and I think, Davin, you'll agree that one of the things that happened during this process is we went through all of these data assessments, all of these plus the next 3 weeks worth in like 6.5 hours with 12 people, and so we just slammed through this stuff. And we had people on the call from probably a third of these to probably two-thirds of these industry sectors, or they knew about them because they were in banking, maybe. But we were able to get kind of rough opinions on what the total loss estimate might be for a relatively short COVID lockdown. Now, and I think the assumption was this thing would be pretty much over by the end of July, right? Or even at the end of June, they'd start lifting, which we started to lift the restrictions. And now it looks like this thing's going to be much more long-lived than anybody thought. And the longer that it goes on, the more damage it does to businesses. More businesses. I mean, a lot of businesses, just barely hung on by their fingernails through the first wave of this. And as they started to relax the lockdown, they bought some more material. They bought plexiglass and new furniture and geared back up, and then got locked down again. And a lot of companies, a lot of local businesses, small operations especially, won't survive an extended period or the up and down of having to go through this lockdown and then lifting of restrictions and then lockdown again. And so, we don't really know. We're probably got a lot better data coming in now, and you really need a robust business retention and expansion program out there surveying everybody. And you're going to hear from Eric Canada on Friday about how one of these BR&E programs work, especially on steroids, which is what you need now. Because you have all these service businesses under duress that normally weren't part of your BR&E campaign. You're just looking at your economic base employers. Now you got your service sector crashing, and you got to go out and find all the businesses that are trying to hang on, want to open back up, and separate them from the ones that are giving up and going to close down, and try to save them. So we're going to hear more about that from Eric and JJ on Friday. So this was just, I just wanted to show you kind of how we developed this data. It was pretty, like I said, cursory, and it's imperfect to say the least, but it's, we'll eventually get really tight numbers on this. I think Guillermo Mazir in week 4 will be able to talk about some of this stuff too. Any questions? Got any more questions on this? What are we doing on time? Okay,
we are 3:04.
Okay. So, I think probably the best thing to do is go back to maybe we just go back to this, and let's go one question at a time. So, anybody want to argue? So this is how we would actually conduct this. Is that anybody want to argue with this 218,195 number for 5 years from now? You think it should be higher, or you think it should be lower?
Sarah does ask if this will be a resource we can use in our assessment. Absolutely.
Yeah. So normally what would happen is we open this up and say, so you would be in groups at your tables, and you would be discussing, and we'd say, okay, we're going to take 15 minutes and discuss this, or until every table's team leader has raised their hand and said, we've decided, or they turn their group name card on its end, and so the facilitators can tell how many tables have reached agreement, and then what we do is we find out who the high table is and who the low table is, and then they debate, and then see if we can get everybody to agree on a number. So this is where you would say, hey, based on what's going on in the world and what we know that we didn't know in May, or those guys were crazy, I don't know what they were thinking, this number, there's no way we're going to have 218,000. We're going to have more or less.
You have lots of people chiming in about this on the chat.
Okay, good. That's what we want. So
they all think lower.
Mark,
yeah.
Mark, this is Jerry. Can I ask a question here? So their population's at 175,000 now, right? Now, when we said earlier it's 175 or something like that.
No, this is for the MSA, so it includes Santa Teresa and everything. This was the population that the group said that the region had living here in January of 2020. So 218, almost 219. Yeah, 218.
And I think that's their 2040 plan. They have that they're going to be at 245,000.
Okay.
So going to go down. Be real close to what it is probably. Yeah.
So, demographers can get pretty good at figuring in 10 years especially if not too much changes, and so remember, this is just 5 years, right? So we're not doing full 10. We're looking at 5 years. So the real question is, if the pandemic lasts 3 years, and people are, and the economy kind of is struggling, you may have people retiring or retiring early and wanting to move, and you may end up with people moving to Las Cruces and Doña Ana County out of major metro areas around the country just to get someplace safer with better. The question is, if you think the demand for more population is there, do you think that do you think that the builders can get enough inventory? Can the city and county permit enough new lots and infrastructure enough new lots, and can the builders and the mortgage lenders get enough housing units up to accommodate the extra population? And that's when you get into, okay, what's the average household size? What kind of living units are you going to have? And does the inventory exist? Is it going to come online in time for you to book an extra 20,000 people in 5 years? And so, these questions, end up, if they're in dispute or somebody has some additional, kind of strategic information, they can bring it back. So in Albuquerque, when we ran the Jobs Council, the Council of Governments convened a group of about 80 people, and we had a table with a bunch of real estate developers there that wanted, they thought that Albuquerque was going to have another 100,000 to 200,000 people at the end of the decade, and I think it was 200,000. And and they prevailed. They persuaded the group. The other 70 people in the room that, that was possible. It wasn't until the quants came back, so it was between Bieber and Charles and a couple of other people that reviewed that assumption. They said there's not enough lot inventory coming online in Albuquerque, and the water system isn't developed in Rio Rancho enough to start bringing on housing at 12,000 permits a day or whatever the rate was supposed to be. That's what it was, leading up to the recession. they were going to get above like 4,000 or 5,000, and they could never get to that 200,000 mark. So the group backed the number down from 200,000 down to like 75,000 or something. So that's how this process is intended to work. So if you can bring information that, you know, so you would have an extended conversation about this population number. Is it going to, could you grow? Conceivably, if enough of the right things happen, and if you could get the economic base restored and the service sector restored, sure you could. How much do you want to grow? Another question. But you want the group to pick a number that's reasonable and it isn't too low, but isn't crazy high, that you can say, this is what we're planning for. We're not saying we want it. We're not saying we got to have it. We're just saying this is what we're going to plan for.
The chat is busy.
So, yeah, Natalie's saying it ought to be 244 in 2025. Okay, that.
And she pulled from a website.
Yeah.
From UNM.
Yeah. So that's probably Beaver, UNM, PRU. So, you know, so I would ask Eric and Davin and, you know, the folks, Ray, the folks that live down there, is the 218 number real? And if it is 244 realistic or not? So Rochelle says the 300 homes are on the market right now. Is that a high number or a low number?
She says it's a seller's market. So that sounds low.
Yeah. So there's not much inventory. You know, you got to wonder what's going to happen to the financial markets, especially local lending, when all these local businesses close and stop paying their rent, and the commercial real estate deficits start backing up into the financial system. You know, is mortgage money going to be easier to get? Are construction loans, are there going to be enough builders that are solvent enough to go get a construction loan? I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen to depress the rate of building permits being pulled.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of good.
We're just catching up on this chat.
Wow. So you got 3,000 homes permitted in Santa Teresa. Okay, so Vincent saying 2000, it was the 218 number came July a year ago.
And then April 2010 is 209,000.
Yeah. All right, so how about we do a poll? Can you run a poll?
We can run a poll.
Let's run a poll, and we'll see if we can get people to iterate what they think the new number should be.
Okay, your poll is live and active.
All right.
All right, guys.
Ooh.
How fun is that, right?
Yeah. This is cool. So we have, you know, let's see, 28%.
82% of the attendees have voted.
Yeah, so we got
There's about 11 people that haven't.
we got 53% think it should be 228.
I think that's your answer.
It's growing. So the real question is, does anybody have any serious? This is how we would conduct this in an open meeting. Does anybody have any, compelling evidence that 228 is wrong?
And just go ahead and unmute and speak if you'd like to.
Yeah. If you think 228 is crazy, why?
I don't have any compelling evidence. I just am I tend to be conservative in my estimations and like to exceed my goals. So I would be more conservative in my estimation.
So 10,000 people, how many new households is that? 40? 40,000? I mean, 4,000?
Hi.
2.4.
Hi. This is Adrienne Barboa. I guess that's what I'm missing in this time when we're not able to be together, is that conversation of why people are getting to the numbers they're getting to. Like I saw that Representative Figueroa put up that, UNM is saying 245, but that was done probably before COVID. And then the current population being 218. So I was like, oh, okay, 5 years, not quite making it to what UNM predicted, because I'm thinking COVID is like a factor there, and that's why I just picked 228. But I guess I'm not a population demographics person, so I'm wondering what other people are, like, what's the thought process of why they would be thinking those numbers? Or
I mean, normally this is easier to do, but of course are people going to be more mobile or less mobile?
And what's drawing them there? That's my question. Is there going to be a lot of new jobs created? Is it retired people coming for something? And what would be the draw to draw over 4,000 people, over 4,000 new households?
Yeah, you would need something compelling, either a push out of LA or other crowded markets, or a really strong campaign to recruit retirees and solo workers, and Davin and Eric reel in a big manufacturer, and Jerry and Chris down in Santa Teresa crank it, and think good things happen in El Paso.
Okay, Teresa Noon's question is good. Teresa just asked, if more people are able to do telework, might they move to big open spaces and still work for big companies remotely?
Yeah.
I think that's a great point, Teresa, as long as they have good internet access.
So the question here is, you want to put 228 in our
I think your poll is overwhelmingly saying yes.
Well, the polls, it's a plurality, right?
You see Jeff's question?
No, can you read those aloud?
Jeff asked, what drew them in years prior? 2000 population was 175,000. 2010 was 210,097. We need to know what has been happening historically as well.
So on Wednesday the 5th, when we start looking at the program theaters, David Wilson does a 5-minute short, and then he's got a deep dive session that I think we went about an hour with him, and he goes into detail on the Las Cruces program that's been running about 8 years, to bring in retirees, wealthy, well-heeled retirees, and Charles Lehman's been part of that effort, and so that's one thing.
Nathan answers, I think, in response to that question, said lots of new retirees, borderland, El Paso and Doña Ana County, plus near-shoring growth in manufacturing and logistics in Santa Teresa, San Geronimo area.
Okay.
Mark, if I could add to that a little bit of historical perspective, because I do think that is important. Around the 2000 to 2005 timeline, we had a booming residential growth market across the country. I mean, it was booming everywhere, and there were a lot of dollars available during that time where people were moving, taking the equity out of their homes in California or New York, and basically deciding on where they could buy, just buy with cash. So number one, I think we look at that time period, there was a combination of things. One was there was an influx of equity in the marketplace across the country. That's one big thing. The second aspect of it was, at that time, there were a couple of developers here in Las Cruces that actually, subdivision developers that had national marketing plans in place as well. So it was getting Las Cruces recognized on the map in a big way for retirees. Around that same time frame, there Las Cruces overall with the private sector partners had what they called was a Rank the Best campaign. And that was basically, I think, a $200,000 national marketing campaign to try to draw people to the Las Cruces region. So there were a lot of things happening at that time period, which I don't know if we have the influx of equity in the housing market today that we had back then. That could be a difference in terms of going forward. The other thing was, I don't know what the numbers are, but I would say the other metric you want to look at is after 2009 recession, what percentage of people actually left New Mexico or Doña Ana County as a whole? Did we lose population as a result of that, and how long did it take to come back? Just food for thought as you're thinking about metrics in this.
Yeah, really good points. Don't you have to have a decent economy for people to even consider moving? I don't know. I mean, you can't have an imploding one where all your, tax-dependent institutions are failing and you can't keep the roads paved and crime's going crazy. But, when an economy's struggling, housing prices go down, and you may actually, draw in people that you otherwise wouldn't, especially retirees.
John's got to consider, I think, there that in El Paso, Texas, and on the Texas side of that whole area, is that there's a lot of new businesses going in there, restaurants, quality of life seem to be higher, and people were moving further south as the builders decided that they wanted to go down there and start building more quality homes and be able to provide a place for those people who are going to live in New Mexico and work in Texas. I think that there's a lot of other factors that went into it, and they're mostly centered around, straddling that border and what Texas can offer from a quality of life standpoint versus what New Mexico offers in so far as low taxes and cheaper to live standpoint.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, it's really easy to just focus on Las Cruces and what's going on there. The Santa Teresa area is actually a suburb of El Paso, and will behave like it.
As much as they don't want to be.
Right. Yeah.
And also factored in there are things like qualities of education and opportunities, school systems and all of those factors.
Right. But, households without children, they don't have to worry about that too much. So it's, all these things are going to come into play, and who knows, who's spending time studying all this stuff for the home builders and the realtors, and that's some of those guys were deliberating on the original May assessment. And again, these will be questions we're gonna curate these questions and pose them to David. If anybody wants to do a deep dive with any of the instructors on any of these questions, we'll set up a separate session to do that, or we'll get these typed up and printed out. So we've got a half hour left, and are there any other? Does anybody think any of these other numbers need to be challenged? So, and let's see if we can get a couple more done. Do we want 228? Is everybody okay with 228 as the new population number?
Your poll indicated overwhelmingly yes.
Yeah, so you got 55% thought it should be 228.
If it's based on a trend that is going to keep going upward because of jobs and growth and potential like that, but if it becomes stagnant because whatever happens with the powers that be decide they don't want to help business growth, in there or things change like that, I don't see population remaining flat, but I think you've got to have some sort of growth.
Yeah, I mean, unless you think the economy is just, going to completely collapse and people are going to run off to Texas because jobs are being created there, it's probably a safe bet it'll grow a little bit.
Well, I think if they pivot right now in the age of COVID, it could grow exponentially higher than we expect it to. But there's got to be a lot of collaboration to make that happen.
Yeah, so you would hedge a really strong market. So we're talking 5 years from now. So, you've got inventory in play now that it's another 18 months to 2 years before new inventory comes on. So you really have about 3 years of capture at a much higher level to mess with. So you don't really have that much time. Those are the kinds of things to think about. But I'm just trying to get a number on the board here so we can move on to the next one.
I like this number because it's the community number. If we were representing the cross-section of Las Cruces, what this number says is not that we are going to have 228 in 5 years, but it says our planning has to be centered around that we're going to have this number.
Good point.
So the issue is we're not looking for truth, but we're looking from the community. What do they want to do their planning around for the next 5 years?
So you're saying that 228 is where the puck is going to be?
Yeah, so we have to plan for 228. That means that instead of 208, we're going to have jobs for 20,000 people. And so where are those jobs going to come from? And so we're not looking for truth. We're looking for the community of what do they believe their future is. And we're going to start by saying, okay, let's plan on getting there.
Okay. I hear acclamation. So we'll put 228 in. You think the workforce age population is the proportion is going to change?
Mark, can you describe the workforce age? Obviously people who are working, but is that 79% of the whole population? Is that what this is saying? That's
what they're saying. Yeah, Charles, are you on?
Yes.
Can you address that question? 79%?
Yeah, workforce age is usually figured 16 to 65. Anybody above 16 and below the age of 65.
That's a broad range.
Workforce
and that's whether or not they're actually in the workforce?
That's just that they're able to work?
Age.
No, the next one is employable workers. That's just if they're of that age, 16 to 65, the whole population, that age.
Okay, so 45% still a good number. So,
no, you skipped. You went fast down.
Right, but I thought everybody was agreeing that 79 was a good number.
Oh, really is 80%? I'm not again a demographics person, but is 80% of that's every 80% of the population is between the ages of 16 to 65? That's pretty incredible.
I think in a community like Las Cruces, though, that makes sense because there's such a big number of college students and younger people.
College town. Yeah, in a college town, that doesn't surprise me.
How about retirees?
And we're talking about the entire Doñana County, not just Las Cruces.
So Eric is saying the median age is about 33.
Stephanie guesses that more than 80% is workforce age.
So you'd say that what percentage would you say then is the median age? I mean, is the workforce age?
Nathan pulled from the census estimates that 16.2% are over 65. Nathan, is that for the county or is that just for Las Cruces?
Sorry, I had to get to the, that's for the county, the MSA. And it estimates that, this is from July 1, 2019, so a little older. It estimates 24% of the county population under 18, and that's 16.2% over 65. So, but that's for the county. And 24% again under 18. 24. So roughly 40%. I mean, well, I don't know. I'm sure there's a way to see what that 16 to 18 is, but that's, what is that? 40.5%. That is either outside or close to outside of the working age population at this point.
So you're off by at least 10% there.
Yeah. I would imply that number is high.
That's countywide. And that, I think that for the county, again, countywide, so great points that folks bring up. And I'm sure we could maybe break that down maybe by zip code or look for ways to break it down by zip code. But that strikes me as right. And so we're still, in 5 years, there are more folks that are going to be coming into, so if we take that maybe as a low point, there's more folks coming into the workforce than there will be folks, there's a higher number in that under 18 who, depending where they are, will be coming in. So anyway, thanks. Yeah, great question. Thank you, Sarah.
So should we do
Seems like it would be hard to really get more accurate than that without diving down into where the retirees are moving. Are they in city limits, outside city limits? You know, all of those other kinds of details. It's hard to know. So it seems to me like 70 to 80% would be maybe a good estimate to start with.
And I would agree with Suzanne. I would say probably put it closer to the 80% rather than getting closer to the 70%.
Are we talking about the city or the county?
We're talking about
MSA.
the MSA.
Oh,
Yeah, if we're talking about the county, and we're going to say that in 2025, we're going to estimate 80% of the population is workforce age. Is that the premise?
I was talking city.
It's not. I thought this was about the county.
Yeah, I think we need
I mean,
to
the MSA is what reaches farther out beyond the city. So I would say
Right.
you
So
got
we
to
have
factor
to-
more in.
the county is the MSA, the entire Doña Ana County. It's my understanding that we are talking about the county in all of this.
So I think the number goes down if the percentage goes down if you're talking countywide based on the numbers that you've given us, Nathan, and the fact that the county has more agricultural production. So I don't know if you're counting those as in the workforce or not, but agricultural producers are not holding down jobs so much. So it depends on how you count all of those folks. And again, I just think that takes a lot of diving down and digging into to really assess.
Your workforce, you know, you're looking at workforce age of 79%. You're at least 30% under the age of 18, total population.
So Mary Holman's was offering 65 as a number.
That's
David too.
65%. I would say that would be a safe number.
Yeah, I would agree. That's safe. It may be slightly higher in 5 years, but I think that's a good number.
Okay.
Just, you know.
we'll use that. Again, next Tuesday, you can change any of these numbers you want if you think you got a compelling case. That's the way this works. Okay, so, and then you have employable workforce. So out of your workforce age, how many of them are willing, able, and qualified? And the reason we ask this question is you don't want to hang your economic development program theaters with jobs to create for which there are no workers. So you want to be careful that, you know, I mean, a lot of these jobs don't pay enough to support families, and we got to be careful with that. And then there's the wages aren't high enough a lot of times to get people out of the wage cliff. So there's a lot of issues here with this. This usually takes a lot of time to zero in on. So are we good with 45? Keep it at 45?
That's what I would say.
Okay.
45 or closer to 40. It's you do have a lot of retirees out there, and then you also have
No, but this is 45 of the 65 that we are all saying is of workforce age.
Right.
How many of them are willing and able to actually go to work?
Right.
And are we,
Right.
and again, are we including agricultural producers or other entrepreneurs who have their own businesses and aren't going to work in jobs, aren't on the employment rolls? So there's a lot of people out there working in ways that they're not considered employed by our employment statistics.
Right. We are including them under the definition.
And how do you define somebody who lives here but works in Texas, or lives here and works elsewhere?
Yep. We're counting them too.
Okay.
And I think 45 is a good number. Maybe
Okay,
even.
great. And again, you know, give it, you know, think about it some more, and you know, come back later in this week or weeks down the road and come back with a case for a different number. And we can always run the what if games with it. All right, how about the, let's see, what are we on next?
Unemployment,
Unemployment.
right there.
Unemployment rate, 4.5%. That was the unemployment rate before the pandemic. And the group was considering that pretty close to structural unemployment. And so there was no unemployment to really gap to close up in this case. And so I don't, you know, that's a lot of communities were very close to full employment. Anybody that was willing, able, and qualified could find a job. And that's really was the definition. I don't know, and you really have to be from an area to know whether that's true or not. So, you know, what do you think of 4.5, and what do you think? You know, what do you think unemployment, that percentage of the workforce of the willing, able, and qualified will be a structural unemployment number in 2024? In other words, if that number of structurally unemployed that you'll never get, that number you'll never get below goes up, you want to put a higher number in the December column. If you think wages are going to go up and wage cliffs are going to get cured, and there'll be less reason to be on the sidelines, then that number you might want to put that number down to 3.3 or something. But those are kind of things you think through here.
Do we know what the unemployment rate is right now during COVID?
That number can probably be derived pretty close, because they've got pretty good data on unemployment filing.
So Jeff Campbell is saying 8.8% for Doña County.
8.8%.
I think that's amazingly low.
I agree.
Gene, Gene offers 11.1 according to the BLS.
So that would be structural, right? Or you're saying the current unemployment. That's just the published number. That's just U1, right? People who have applied for unemployment. So McCamley's number is just to get in the unemployment number for the state, you have to have applied for unemployment and be actively seeking a job. So if you've left the market, if you've given up, if you're on the sidelines because you've got your unemployment insurance and you're not going back in the market, that number is higher. So if you take U6, I mean, at the height of the recession, the Great Recession, they were estimating U6 be above 20% for a year or two. So that's why I say these numbers are all over the place depending on the definition and the location you're in. So that's one of the things that we try to get everybody conversant with, is how these numbers a lot of times don't mean what you think they mean.
Hey, Mark, when are we looking at this? Are we looking at this report saying it's going to be effective this past this coming January, or is it today? Or because with restaurants, for instance, restaurants and hospitality, essentially very limited right now. That's not the way it's going to be later, although because of the closure, we're going to lose a lot. Nationally, we're looking at 30%, a little over 30% of restaurant and hospitality never coming.
Well, now we're talking about what you think the job market's going to be like. We're just saying, is your definition of full employment going to change? So you're going to tolerate a 6% unemployment floor. You're going to call 6% full employment in 2024, or are you going to call 4.5? So because remember what the objective here literally is, can we get our economy back to full employment? Full employment means everybody that's willing, able, and qualified to work has access to a job above some percentage of structurally unemployed going around looking for a job or getting some training or certificate before they move up or something, or go back into the workforce. So it's really, we're just looking for the floor. What's structural unemployment going to be in 2024? And that's why they didn't change it. They said it'd be 4.5 was kind of where they were pushing the envelope of full employment in January.
Do we consider all the extraneous factors that go into it that are both in place now and that will be in place then? I mean, if you think about it based on where we are right now, we're in the middle of a pandemic that doesn't look like it's going to be over anytime soon. We're in the middle of a national election that is going to be over whether we like it or not. But then by 2024, we'll be in the midst of another, or one have just ended at that point, but a whole lot of factors that are going to go into jobs and consumer confidence and a whole bunch of different things. Are we trying to predict the future at that point, or are we going based on?
Exactly. I think so. For example, one of the things that typically happens when someone's out of work for a year or two, it gets much harder for them to get back into the workforce. They become less employable. And it's everything from the PTSD, social PTSD that comes from being out of work, and just, having all your skills get rusty, and all sorts of factors go into it. But if for example, if the service sector stayed depressed for a long time, and you had a bunch of people living in Doñana County that couldn't find work for 2 years, you're probably looking at a higher floor for structural unemployment. I would think. So those are the kind of things to think about and talk about for getting this number set.
Hey Mark, On that, I'm looking at history here. In 2 years after the last recession in 2008, they were at 8.6. We're using kind of historical numbers that we're looking at 2 years after. I'd probably
They're
list
calling
that
full
as the
employment
floor.
They were calling unemployment, structural unemployment, 8.6?
Right. 2 years after the recession in 2008.
Yeah.
Came from New Mexico Department of Workforce Solutions, and that was released for the Las Cruces MSA.
Is Charles on?
And what was it pre-recession? I guess, like, what was the growth?
Mark, this is Charles. You got two types of unemployment. You got the frictional unemployment, which is at full employment, it's not going to fall below that level, which is probably this 4.5%. 4.5% is you assume you're at full employment, anything less is frictional. The 8% 2 years after the last recovery indicates that the Las Cruces area hadn't recovered fully from the financial recession. There was both structural and frictional unemployment. Frictional could have been 4% or so. The structural is 4.5. The state required, and most of the counties required, up to almost the present time, to get back down to this full employment rate of 4.5%. And what you're looking at here, if you're looking 5 years out and your frictional is 4.5%, the question is your economy going to recover enough where you can keep it down at 4.5%? Or is there still going to be some additional structural unemployment that makes it higher, say 5 or 6%? My thinking would be, based on how long it took to recover from the financial recession, that it might take that much time to recover from the COVID recession, and their 4.5% really needs to be higher, maybe 5.5 or 6 or 6.5%.
Well, do you think we have this? Do you think we have this factor expressed the right way? So I'm still kind of confused. Like maybe nobody else is, but so are you saying we should call structural employment in 2024 5 to 6%?
I'm saying we should call the unemployment in December 2020, December 24, that unemployment would be both frictional and structural. If you assume the frictional, you were at full employment in January of 2020 at 4.5, that's your frictional unemployment. You're going to have structural on top of that. So I'm saying in December 24, if you have 6.5%, it would be 4.5% frictional and 2% structural.
Okay.
But regardless of whether it's frictional or structural, the question is what your unemployment rate would be then.
So so really, is your goal? So this is the question, everybody, for the calculus here. If 6% is where you're trying to get to, that's going to be your goal. That's going to be your employment. That's going to drive your employment, full employment goal, and it's whatever you want to peg. And so if you say 6% is going to be what you're going to call full employment, you probably won't get past it because of the friction Charles is talking about. Is that the right way to say it, Charles?
Right. There's always going to be frictional unemployment. If you're looking at the 6%, that's a number of people are going to have to figure out you want to find jobs for. But regardless of what you do, you're not going to get below the 4.5% if that's your frictional unemployment. So there's always some frictional unemployment going on there. It looks like if this is full employment now, it was 4.5%. So if you're at 6.5% in December 2024, you want to try to get as much as you can, but it looks like 2% of that is what you want to try to get below. Ideally, you always want to get down to zero. You're never going to get down to zero, but you want to get down to at least that 4.5%.
Okay, it's 4 o'clock. I suggest that we.
I have a quick clarifying question.
Okay.
If this on that second paragraph, it says natural unemployment for most places is around 4%. So I'm assuming that this January 2020, 4.5% is the natural unemployment, which is both the frictional and structural. And so
right.
our job to just figure out the December 2024 is to see whether we think that's going to go up or where that natural unemployment will be.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
You got it. So, so we have the unemployment number to confirm, and then the economic base number to confirm, and then the natural attrition to peg. So so Sarah's just prompting me to talk about the teams. So this would be an opportunity for you to call a side meeting. If you want to set up a Zoom call for your team, let Sarah know, and she will set it up. She'll send a calendar invite to everybody on your team, so you guys can respond. Very similar to the way we set up the orientation calls. Just be an automatic deal where you don't have to. It makes it a lot easier to find a date to get together if you want to do that.
And if you want to do, I know several teams have already set up their own meetings. That's fine too. And just shoot me an email or include us on your email thread so we can, so we won't hassle you.
Or to your advisor.
Yes.
So anyway, so so we're making good progress on this. The next really hard question, and the one we end up spending a lot of time on usually is this a legitimate economic base number, this 34% number? And that's usually a really interesting one. So why don't you all read a little bit more about it, and if you have any questions, either talk to your advisor or you can call me, and then we'll try to dispatch these last assessment numbers or findings and get a hard number for your job needs.
Mark, can't each team come up with their own numbers?
Well, they can. Sure.
Right.
I mean,
they could just.
Yeah. So they come up with their own numbers, and then when we get to it, we come back to it next Tuesday. Actually,
next
Wednesday. We'll come back to it, and we're not going to have a lot of time, but we'll come back to it and just have the teams express their rationale for what it ought to be. And maybe we do a poll again and get through the last couple of numbers. But the idea is to get this job number set so you guys can start filling out your PowerPoint presentations so you don't have to do it all the last day.
And Adrian asks, what was the answer about getting with our groups? So Adrian, I believe the groups, you guys are tasked with putting together a meeting, and you can involve me. I can set it up for you on Zoom, or you guys can do it on your own and just let us know that you have a Zoom meeting or a meeting in progress. Does that answer your question? Okay.
And we can leave this this meeting open for a few minutes afterwards, after everybody goes, if anybody wants to huddle. There's a way to book salons on this thing too, which we haven't figured out how to do on the breakouts, and we may be able to do that at some point. We may do that on the when we get to the theaters. Yeah. So it's probably a good time if you've gotten through all the other reading on the resource page. We're going to start posting the theater explanations, and they're all videotaped, and we've got all of them done except 2, and so we've got to clean some of them up. But as we start posting those, just when you got some free time, get on and see what's been posted under the. It'll be under August 5th, won't it, Sarah?
I'm sorry, I'm replying to the chat.
We're going to post the theater sessions. So I've interviewed or set up a taping for all the programs, all the program theaters for economic base, and they're really good. Did Jen Schreier, who's Cabinet Secretary for Tourism today, is one of really you're gonna really like that one, especially all the folks that are trying to figure out the tourism theater for their communities. With a spectacular session this morning. Got Victor Wang going to do entrepreneurship. There's some really good sessions, and there's 8 of them, 9 of them, and some of them go an hour. So start working your way through them if you can, and coming up with questions. And they're all agreed to come back at some point and do a deep dive session if anybody needs it. So we may start scheduling those too.
Great. Groups are actively getting together.
Okay.
And if you guys run into any problems getting a hold of some of your members, let us know and we can try to reach out to them as well. I know there were some emails that didn't go through for us right away. We had to work with them a little bit. Good. So we have Lynn is reaching out to Team 5.
Yeah.
Very good.
And so this is the really tedious part of this process, is getting all these numbers set, going over all the statistical stuff, and the forecasting is it's mind-numbing to a lot of people. The really fun part of this and the meaningful part of it comes in the back end, where from weeks 3, 4, and 5. When we start talking about what could these different program theaters actually produce in the way of job creation. And then it starts to get really fun and interesting and inspiring. So we're almost through the really tough, tedious part, and you're doing really, everybody's doing really well. If you guys have any ideas for how we can make this more dynamic, more interesting, and again, if there's something not being covered enough that you'd like to go into, we've already got a couple of side seminars set up that have been requested, and one of them was by the folks in Grants, New Mexico, wanted to take a deep dive, so we've got that scheduled for Thursday. So anyway, feel free to let us know if there's something we could be doing a little better. We're going to try to do some more of this polling too. Now, the other thing is, on Friday, try to, because Ronnie wants to see everybody.
Oh yeah.
We're gonna have, instead of it just being the webinar where everybody's cameras off, we're gonna try to conduct that session in a Zoom meeting like we just did.
I believe what we decided on is pulling everybody's pictures up as panelists during Ronnie's presentation.
Oh, we did?
Yeah.
Is he okay with it? He wants to see everybody's facial expressions. He will?
He will.
Okay.
So what'll happen is everyone who attends Friday's webinar, it will still be a webinar, and all of the other speakers will be webinar style. For Ronnie's section, because he wants the audience, we will promote everyone up to panelists, which will pull you on screen as if we're in a meeting.
Okay, good. And we'll explain that again on Friday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, he does. He's hilarious. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Hey, so don't miss Friday, because, Tom Stringer's a rock star.
Oh, yeah.
And Eric Canada is like the best in the business, and Ronnie's hilarious. It's going to be good.
I'm just
Claire, you should be able to find Charles' email on the website under advisors.
I just sent it to her too.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Mary, every session is recorded. Sometimes they take a while because I do go through and edit to take out some of the things.
All the swearing.
Yeah. And then they take a while. They're pretty large files, so there's a lot of load time. But yes, every single session will be posted on the Student Resources page.
Thank you.
And slides, as long as we get them. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Hillary, can we post the PowerPoints before the lecture? If we receive them, we can try to do that. We sometimes don't get them. Some of the speakers are working on them up until the point that they present. So as much as we can, we will try to do that.
Yeah, since they're running their own slides, a lot of them are going to they'll be tinkering with them to the last second. And what you want is the slides, because a lot of times they add slides in at the end. So we're not asking them to send them in ahead of time. So we probably could post them before you can get the session edited, though.
I can post slides.
If they come in.
As long as I get them from the presenters, I'll post them immediately. Yeah, those are quick.
So I'll be the presenter police and make sure those guys are getting that stuff in.
Okay, thank you.
Is class dismissed? Are we just hanging out?
Yes.
What?
Class is dismissed. We're just hanging out, just to let
We're just
few
letting
more
people
yeah.
mix and mingle if they want for a few minutes.
You can hang out a little bit and ask.
If anybody wants to talk about anything.
Yeah.
Well, we don't want Mr. Triviani to get mad at us, so hopefully he dismisses us.
Thanks, everybody. Please stay
Okay.
safe.